Jim Hacking started his career in law settling barge disputes on the Mississippi River. Jim and wife Amani now run Hacking Immigration Law, one of the nation's preeminent resources for immigrants looking to become citizens. Needless to say, this episode is timely given the election of Donald Trump to a second term and the resulting actions and executive orders associated with our border, labor, citizenship, and foreign dreams. We talk about the reality of what Tom Homan is doing, the failures of both Obama and Biden, and more. With over 100,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel, Jim continues to educate and entertain in this world that simply looks to provide the American dream for so many that are viewed as enemies and threats in today's environment. Please be sure to subscribe to our show, and let's go. All right, I got a little something special for my guest today. I'm gonna play a little rolling music a la Soccer Dad Pod, only tell me you're joking style. Here we go. For my guest, without further ado. Oh my goodness. I botched it right out of the gate. I understand that you and your better half are quite the David Gray fans.
We are. We just got back from Minneapolis where we saw him, and we're going to California to see our eldest son in a couple weeks, a week from Friday, and I just realized that Mr. David Gray will be in the San Diego area, so I might end up seeing him twice in 2 weeks. I'm very excited.
He's we're fairly close in birth year. I'll put it that way. There's all the other terms are kind of sad. He was one, in those Prime Fun days, the little White Ladder album.
Right. White Ladder came out right when we sort of started hanging out. Mamani and I started hanging out and getting married and having kids. So he's really been the soundtrack of our relationship.
Was it your wedding song?
No, that was Tracy Chapman. But yeah, David Gray, this will be, if we see him in San Diego, it'll be the seventh time.
Give Me a Reason, Tracy Chapman?
No, it was the Promise.
I assumed it was something much sweeter than the one I chose.
Yeah.
Jim Hacking, friend, long-time social associate, family associate. Our wives have been friends for a long time. Our kids all went to school together. Well, chunks of them did.
Right.
Brought you on. I hit you up a little while ago. Number one, because obviously I follow everything that you do via socials in particular. And given the new format of this show and what I really wanted to do, I wanted to bring, somewhere within my mission statement that ChatGPT said it would be a good idea. You bring taboo topics to life. And I don't think there's many topics, subject matters in our society today, maybe trans.
And abortion and Palestine.
Yeah, so the four horsemen of taboo topics. Immigration, because it seems as if, well, really, throughout both of our lifetimes, always one of those boogeyman man that benefited everybody at a particular time, and it just rotated, and here we are today in 2025, no solutions, and even bigger billboards of how bad and dangerous, etc. So that's kind of a little bit of the why I wanted to bring you on, because I also wanted to. Plenty of people have theories, plenty of people have opinions and feelings, and and it's all spoon-fed via their bias bubbles, which is my new favorite term, by the way.
Bias bubbles, nice. Echo chambers.
Yeah, echo chamber. Somebody else used that a lot. Bias bubble. I don't hear that often. So.
Oh, it's nice. You should trademark that shit.
I should.
Can I cuss on here?
So yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Fuck yeah, you can. So I wanted to bring you on, and I want to kind of do a little walk through, a little bit of the why, what you do, what it really is, what's going on, and we'll dip and dodge, and I don't have a timeline on this, as I mentioned, just a few kind of bullet points that I want to be sure to bring up. So for let's start here. As a friend of friend, knowing what you do, knowing kind of how your family operates, because your wife is your partner in the business as well. I have down here my notes, mental health check. We're entering third week of Trump Part 2. Him and his administration through the lens of Mr. Homan, et cetera. No, nobody's unaware of what's attempting to be done right now, and you work on the other side of that fence. How are you just personally right now?
That's a great way to start the show, and thanks for that, and thanks for the intro. I have been very deliberate this time around in giving myself mental space. I'm exercising in the morning, I'm journaling, I'm meditating, I'm going in the steam room at Lifetime. I'm having some light meetings in the morning, and then I sort of have my 2 hours to focus, because the way that I likened it on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago is it's like a fire hose or a river coming at me, and I can choose to jump into the river as soon as I wake up in the morning and be in the river until I go to sleep at night. But I need mental space, because this is going to be a long haul. You mentioned that it's the third week. It feels like the third month, and that's what happened last time with Trump. And one nice thing about this time is that we sort of I knew once the election was over that we needed to get into gear and to be ready for this. So much more ready, much more balanced, much more selective in what I'm allowing into my head. I'm reading Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens, which was written in 1855, just to keep my mind out of current events. I haven't watched the news since the day after the election. I don't know if you've ever seen, I'm sure you have, on work sites where they say, we've gone 137 days without a workplace accident.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to go see how many days I can go in a row without hearing Trump's voice, right? Like,
Yeah.
So I broke it the other day because I was scrolling on TikTok and there he was. So I had to start over. But I'm really trying to be selective in what I let into the noggin.
So let me ask specifically about that, because I have a number of friends that are probably in, I know that they are in similar headspaces. A few that are very engaged / active in the political science world, in the poli-sci econ world, that have told me that anecdotally they've removed news apps off their phone, and they've taken social media off their phone, but it's on their laptop or their desktop, etc. And there's another side to kind of that theory as far as like what's the real advantage there. Yes, it's self-serving, but what is it? Democracy dies in darkness, right? There's the other side of that coin where, not that it's quitting, but it feels as if it's non-engaging. How do you view that? How do you true that up? Because you're in the trenches every day fighting, for the opposite of what we're all reading in social media and on the quote news, but you're outwardly stating that you're not engaging it regularly, kind of from an individual standpoint. How do you true that up?
I don't need to mainline MSNBC. That's what I've been telling myself. I don't need to plug in right away to the outrage machine. And I know there's lots of bad things going on, but I simply don't have the bandwidth to even pay attention to all that. I know that, like, there's things with USAID, and there's things, I'm sure there's terrible things going on with the environment. I'm sure there's all kinds of things that I don't really know about, because of Project 2025 touches a lot of things other than immigration. I simply can't do my job and be my best if I'm diving into all those things. I had to let it go, right? And so I have news sources that I trust. So I'm a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. They send me an update every day. I subscribe to another immigration news source.
I can't imagine what the headlines on those say. Like, day one, but damn, we're fucked.
It's all these. It's really strange now, because when Trump came in last time, they put in all these executive orders, and then the Biden team came in and undid all those executive orders. Well, now the Trump team is coming back, so it's really almost impossible to dig down to see what they're actually saying, because you have to go back to 3. It's almost like a triple negative sentence. You have to go back. But anyway, so I'm getting my news from places that I trust, and I have Google Alerts set up so that I'm getting the immigration news that I need. But it actually is, I was thinking about this today at the gym, it's actually taking me an hour a day to figure out what is actually changing. And there's so much fear, and rightly so, and concern, and a lot of headlines that I need to pay attention to what they're actually doing. I was greatly solaced on Sunday by an Ezra Klein column in the New York Times where he quoted Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon said that our opposition party aren't the Democrats. Our opposition party is the media. And all we have to do is feed them three things while we do what we really want to do over here. And they'll have a feeding frenzy
Right.
about the three things. And so what I'm trying to do is to pay attention to what they're really doing, because, I have this YouTube call-in show. I talk to immigrants every day, and I keep telling them there's things I keep returning to. I keep returning to the serenity prayer. What are the things that I can change? Those I can't. What's actually real,
Right.
and what are rumors, and what are things that we can actually put our hands on that's tangible, and then fight those things that are important and that are real.
Let me ask you just a generic question, maybe an opinion, get your opinion on this, zooming out beyond just immigration, but really the nature of, a million different forest fires at the same time. The Democratic Party, last year, really, I would say from midterms 22, it seemed as if they took the bait every time, to the point of what Bannon, illustrated. Like, look, what he really said is they're not that smart. If we just throw everything at the wall, they're going to bite at all of it. And while they're biting at all of it, we're going to go and do shit that really is going to hurt, or in their view, fix. So here's my question. I want to get your opinion in regards to the DNC and the quote super smart consultants that were on Team Blue. How bad, in your opinion, did they botch the messaging and via a lack of focus?
Well, I think the Democratic Party has been fundamentally flawed for a really long time. I know that you know this, but just here in Missouri, the Missouri Democratic Party is basically non-existent. There's no funding for it. They've conceded Missouri. They've conceded these red states. So on a local level, I'm completely disheartened by the lack of any real idea. I mean, I always come back to that what's wrong with Kansas, where the Republicans decided 30 years ago to have a long-term play to turn this country redder and redder. I don't see that on the Democratic side. I see a lot of what you said, which is responding, taking the bait every time. And then I just don't think that we're not building the structures that we need. We're not building a bench. I mean, the idea that Joe Biden was going to be our nominee, it's just, I don't even know who's going to come in 3 years from now, right, or 4 years from now.
Right. Yeah, it is one of those things that, obviously we follow each other on socials, and everybody wants to point out, you've got TDS or whatever. And it's like, these people conveniently forget that I will absolutely bash.
We called Obama the deporter in chief. We called Obama the deporter in chief.
Yeah, but that doesn't fit the narrative. And I think, isn't that really kind of part of the issue here? Like, there's the reality of the perception, and people like yourself that are in the trenches that are doing the work, and you're pointing out the reality that Obama was like not friendly to the immigration process. And frankly, what he did should have made rural America happy as pie. But we lose the narrative. So, within your world, which is such a hot button topic, how do you view the narrative? Is there anything close to symmetry or middle ground within your newsletters, within just kind of when you do happen to pop on socials? Or do you just feel that we are almost in Newton's cradle right now with the two balls on the end, just fighting it away?
Well, there's a clip of Ronald Reagan and George Bush, either in 1976 or 1980, running for president, and they're having a debate between the two of them about immigration. And if you listen to that, they would sound today like Dick Durbin or AOC, or the conversation has moved so far to the right that it's really hard to even recognize where we used to be. But I have a fundamental belief that immigrants bring great value to the country, and it's not just because they pick our strawberries. A lot of people like to reduce this down to some economic argument, but in reality, immigrants make our country better. It's more fun having immigrants in the country. We have different kinds of food. We have different kinds of experience. We have different kinds of knowledge bases, and not to mention all the contributions that immigrants make when it comes to starting businesses, being doctors, being lawyers, and doing things to really employ a lot of Americans and make the country better. We are cutting off our nose to spite our face with these harsh immigration policies, and so I really think we're losing out on that.
Let me just ask a super simple question then. why do you think Middle America can't see the reality of what you just described? So, and let me just frame it in like stupid, minuscule terms here, right? You go to said mountain town in Colorado, and you go there because of one, the scenery, two, the services, and within the services, you've got the killer taco joint, and you got the little Italian restaurant. You got all these things that, like, when we define an area that is appealing to us to live in, to engage in, to travel to, what you're talking about is really kind of the impact.
Flavor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can you imagine if all we had was haggis and chicken pot pie and fish and chips?
Be pretty boring.
Right? Where's the disconnect? Why are we not able to look beyond skin tone or, the extreme right narrative to look at, hey, look, this is what's happening from our services, from our food to our services to our culture to our entertainment. Where's the disconnect in your opinion?
My favorite movie is Do the Right Thing.
Spike Lee. See, we are of the same generation.
So in that movie, John Turturro's character and Mookie, Spike's character, debate the issue of race, and they're talking about Michael Jordan. And John Turturro's character says, well, Michael Jordan, he's not black. He's not black, right?
Right.
And there are a lot of people who like a particular immigrant. My man Pedro, like, I can't tell you how sick I am of hearing about this is the call that I get over and over. And these are probably 70% Trump voters of these calls that I get. Jim, I'm really bummed out about what's happening with President Trump. I've got this guy, Pedro. He's been working for me for 10 years. I really want to get him his papers.
Yep.
And I want to do everything I can to keep old Pedro, because he's great, i.e. he's not black. He's not like those other immigrants, right? And so, JB, I would throw it back to you. I mean, it's part of that whole thing where people are voting against their own self-interest, right? They're voting.
Yeah, but you got to be so careful with that. As much as I love the reality of that statement,
yeah,
that is because that too has become taboo. So when you point out that somebody's voting against their own self-interest, whether it's due to immigration status and employment and being able to stay here, or
voting for oligarchs and billionaires,
yeah, or hey, guess what? You're on SNAP and you just voted for somebody that wants to kill that whole department,
right?
Or you have a kid with an IDP and you just voted for somebody that wants to kill the Department of Education and funding all these programs that help your kid with needs. Like, there's a million examples of that. So, like, this whole self-interest, I don't think people understand what it even is. I think they're just feeding into the fury of it. It's like the Coliseum. Choose your color.
Right. And to me, we are reading less. The reading level of Americans is going down. I mean, people are heralding, and I believe that the trades are greatly underserved, and that we definitely need to build up the trades.
Yeah, 1,000%.
But people aren't reading on their own. They're taking they're mainlining their bias bubble, whichever it is, red or blue.
That's copyrighted, by the way.
Sorry about that. I guess I'll be hearing from your lawyer.
Yeah. Well, that's you, by the way. So.
So anyway, I think that it's to me, it's Rush Limbaugh, man. It's like getting that anger out into the world. It's a hate. It's getting the hair to stand up on the back of people's necks and really want to go get the other. To me, that's what it comes down to.
So let's talk about. Let's jump back into you,
Sure.
you personally, your firm. One of my really well thought out questions here on my screen is why immigration law?
Yeah. So
let's start there.
So I can see my dorm from college right out your window, Griesedick. I went to St. Louis U, and at the end of my time at St. Louis U, I thought I was going to be a priest. And I left St. Louis to move to Denver, and I studied to be a Jesuit novitiate. I only lasted about 6 months. Then I came back home and worked for a law firm, and that was always my backup, was to be a lawyer. And so I went to law school, and I met my wife in 1994. We were in the same section. And then I was really disillusioned with the church, mostly because of the sex abuse stuff and stuff that had happened to me. So I left the church, and in 1998, I became a Muslim. In 1999, I married my wife, who's originally from Egypt, came to America when she was 7 in 1979 from Egypt. And then I was doing sort of commercial litigation and then maritime law, and then 9/11 happened. And so when 9/11 happened, I knew that everything was going to be different. And it felt a lot like it feels now, where everything sort of feels upside down, where I knew that I was going to be doing a lot of public speaking. I was going to be doing a lot of explanation. And so I still was doing maritime law. I was doing barges. So a barge would hit a barge on the river, and people would fight about it. That was my job. But the Muslims at the mosque would always ask me to help them with immigration. And so I'd say, well, I'm a maritime lawyer. I work on barges. What's a barge? Can you help me get my green card?
I always, so growing up in Granite City, I know a lot of people that worked on the levee and lots of dams. And whenever they would talk about barges hitting each other, I just envisioned the scene from Austin Powers, like, the steamroller getting or the golf cart getting like, how do you... Like, or the steamroller rolling the guy over, like, no. Like
the first case I worked on was a barge got loose in high water and knocked out 137 barges downriver. And so the guy who had the one barge was fighting with the owner of the 137 barges. So I did that for 4 years. And so it's hard to get your arm around a barge. It's much more fulfilling to work on immigration. So people kept asking me, and I kept trying to refer them to other attorneys, and they'd be like, Jim, I'm too busy. And so I said to Amani, my wife, I said, man, Amani, I really want to open up my own firm. Like, I had what Michael Gerber calls the entrepreneurial seizure, where I had to do this. She goes, that's funny because you've never mentioned it. But she was working at SLU, teaching at the law school. So we had our health insurance and our mortgage. And so then in 2007, I opened it up thinking that I would do law for immigrants. So like car accidents for immigrants, estate plans for immigrants, whatever. And very, very quickly it was.
Yeah, so you thought you were going to go into kind of generic law, but your target market would be immigrants.
And my target market would be immigrants, but all they wanted me to do was immigration. So in 2012, we went to immigration only.
So I was reading through your site, and in your words, in the about section, the whole why, right?
Yeah.
You walked us into the when and kind of the draw into immigration law, but I'm just going to read real quickly some of your own words there. Okay. These are bullet points. Number one, people have been taken advantage of by notarios.
Notarios, yeah.
Notarios, thank you. I'll ask you to define that in a second. Number two, people have had their cases screwed up. Number three, people began to realize that USCIS is not meant to help them, but rather designed to prevent them from getting the immigration benefits they are entitled to. And then the last one that I noted was back then, there was indeed a huge need in the immigrant community for quality legal representation. A couple things that I noticed about this. Number one, you write very, very simply. Like you're an attorney, and on your page, you write it in terms in which I could hear those words uttered at the corner of the pub.
That's my special power.
Because most people are like, what'd you say?
Especially lawyers, they talk in gobbledygook.
Yeah. So notarios, let's go number one. People have been taken advantage of by notarios. What does that mean?
It's a fake lawyer. So these are form fillers or, hey, okay, I can help you get a benefit.
People have had their cases screwed up. That makes sense. I'm going to assume it's because there's probably not a large number of truly qualified immigration attorneys, that know the ins and outs of a system that, frankly, has been broke for 50 plus years.
Right. Yep.
People began to realize that the USCIS, acronym for
U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services,
is not meant to help them, but rather to prevent them from getting the immigration benefits they are entitled to. Is that kind of a carryover of what we just mentioned?
So after 9/11, they split INS up into ICE, which is Immigration Customs Enforcement, which is the mean people, and USCIS, which is supposedly the nice people. But cases, JV, that used to take 3 or 4 months now currently take 2 years to get. Like if you want to bring your spouse here from overseas, from Kenya, you're talking 3 years.
Okay, so historically then, give me a little bit of a lesson as to the why, because prior, at some point, those cases had to have taken less amount of time.
They did.
Now, all of a sudden, they're taking that amount of time. What happened?
Sure. So 2 things happened to really start this. Number one was COVID, and number 2 was Trump. So Trump took a lot of the money from USCIS and tried to use it for enforcement, tried to use it for his wall. And so therefore they weren't hiring people, and therefore they weren't processing cases as quickly as they used to. COVID, they had to work from home, and there were a lot of protocols that they had to adopt in order to keep people safe. Like if you and I were going to an interview, we had to sit, back then we sat in different rooms and did it all on an iPad. And then the real problem, though, is that throughout the Trump first presidency, and as we've seen now, they are on a rocket docket to fix and change as many things as possible administratively, right? They're not doing it legislatively. It's all administrative. So we should talk about that later. But with that same sense of urgency, they would change things in a week that used to take 6 months under Obama. And so now, or when Biden came into office, then they didn't have that same sense of urgency. They just sort of let it. There was nobody working to make things go faster. Nobody caring about the immigrants. Nobody trying to improve the system. They just kept it the same
from a legislative standpoint,
or just from like the Secretary of State, the head of Homeland Security, the head of Immigration. Nobody was looking around saying, boy, our processing times really suck. It used to be 2 or 3 months. Now it's 2 years. There's no accountability. There's no one to talk to. There's no constituency, because the people that I represent and the people that are getting processed through the immigration system don't vote. I mean, they might have a spouse that votes, but really it's sort of a silent majority, and they just sort of get kicked around. And so there hasn't been a real sense of urgency to fix any of it, because Trump gutted the State Department.
So one of the people that I love and follow religiously on socials is Mark Cuban, Mr. Shark Tank himself.
Smart dude.
And he is repeatedly, when it comes to this particular subject, I love his direct approach in analysis and his own opinions as to when it comes to policy. When it came to immigration, and I'm paraphrasing, anybody can go and look it up to get the exact words. But what he has said about immigration, illegal immigration in particular, he's like, this is Wall Street's big, bad, dirty secret. He goes, the reason why it has not been fixed is because there's a profit motive within, the agriculture economy, the manufacturing economy,
hotels,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In so much that this summer worker programs, things like that, is just a simple way to basically control your cost and frankly get workers that are willing to do it, because they're looking for more of a safety, security, et cetera. You got them by the balls, basically. And the economies within service industries, et cetera, they know that. So the boardrooms, his theory is the reason why this has never been fixed, because it's been an absolute bottom line benefit to mainstream America from controlling costs and creating shareholder value. How when I paraphrase Mark Cuban's analysis, what's your take on the economic side of what he's talking about?
It's 100% accurate. Our economy is propped up on the backs of workers who are being exploited. I have a friend that's all he does is he litigates on behalf of migrant workers who are being taken advantage of. But even if you take out the bad apples and just look at how the system works on its own, who benefit? You always have to come back, as you did, to who benefits from the system. And of course, it's us and what we pay for strawberries. It's what we pay for a hotel room. It's propping up this economy by making it hard and forcing immigrant workers to work at low wages and to get taken advantage of. So I think it's absolutely correct.
That's scary, though, a little bit, isn't it? Like, because really what we're talking about are pawns. We're not talking about, Wall Street always wins in the shareholder value. Right. Like, these individuals are viewed as a portion or a component of shareholder value.
So let's think about, I could look at lots of different parts of the economic sectors, but let's just talk about Indian tech workers.
Okay. Perfect place stop. Indian tech workers. We're gonna reset the camera here real quick. Don't go anywhere. Indian tech workers. Next. Okay, right before my technical break there, Indian tech workers. Break it down.
So if you come to the United States to work, or let's say let's talk about our friend, what should we call him? Riz. Riz comes to the United States as an international student, graduates with a STEM degree. Riz can work on his F1 visa for a year and then 2 more years, and then he goes into the H-1B system. The H-1B system is a lottery. So last year, about 500,000 applications were filed for 65,000 undergraduate spots and 20,000 graduate spots. So,
wait a second. How how many spots were available and how many people applied?
65,000 for undergrads, 20,000 for graduates of institutions of higher learning with a master's degree. So 85,000, and there were over 500,000 applications filed.
Wow. Okay.
And let's say that you JB wanted to hire an H-1B worker. You'd have a really hard chance, because what happens is these big staffing companies, they know they need 100 people. Well, they'll file 1,000 applications.
You mean like Tesla?
Definitely Tesla. Definitely Tesla. I mean, well, I don't want to get sued, but I would imagine Tesla.
I'll say it. He can sue me. What do I got?
Yeah.
Come and take my Mustang.
So in any event, yeah, so they stack the deck, but I want to get to what's actually life is like for the H-1B workers.
Okay.
So they go to work for this company, and they can work in H-1B status for 6 years if they get selected. And then if they want to get a green card and stay in the United States, the employer at some point in those 6 years can start the green card process. There are caps on the number of people who can get employment-based green cards on the different categories that there are. So if somebody had a master's degree, they'd go into the EB2 category, and there's a per country cap. So for Indian workers, they have to stay on that H-1B for about 15 years.
So who creates or who has created the per country number?
Congress.
And when was the last time they updated those numbers?
In the 90s.
Makes sense.
Early 90s. Yeah, so it hasn't been updated. And so when I think to myself about who's being exploited by the system, it's all these tech companies that are using a lot of H-1B workers that are sort of having an indentured servitude or forced labor, where if you want to be able to stay in the United States, you're going to have to stay in this H-1B category for 15 years waiting for your visa to become available so you get your green card.
So, okay, so optically, why do you think the H-1B tech immigrant is being given such a hard time to achieve status?
Because if they were able to go out on the open market, if they were able to get a green card, like during the campaign, everyone's like, did you hear what Donald Trump said, Jim? He says, if you graduate from a college, you should be able to get an H-1B or a green card right then. And of course, it was all made up. His campaign walked it back. Sorry if I'm talking too loud.
No, you're fine.
His campaign walked it back quickly. But if you think about, if you get 14 years of labor at a salary that you sort of get to set, statutorily set, it's based on the salary in your area. If these people all hit the open market at the same time after a year of H-1B,
Right.
then everything would be more expensive, and then we'd have to pay things and pay more for things. And that's what I mean when I say we're all benefiting on the backs of immigrant labor.
Okay, so the parallel, because what we're talking about are programmers, we're talking about software specialists, we're talking about high-tech, high-brained, high-IQ'd individuals that have come from environments, communities, cultures that way overvalue, or maybe not overvalue, they value at a level STEM that most Americans don't.
Right.
And then they have the process or the diligence to find a way to get their little Johnny or Jamie over to Stanford or Cal Poly or whatever. And they come here and they do the work from an educational standpoint that, again, the average Joe American kid is not doing on scale.
Right.
And who benefits but Silicon Valley, Cuban and his boys down in Dallas, they know it too, because that's a tech hub, Austin, et cetera. And what you're describing is basically a system that is able to suppress wages at the highest level.
Here's another one for you. Really, really smart kids go to medical school in their home country. They come to the United States on a J-1 visa. If they want, and that usually requires them to go back home for 2 years at the end of their studies. The idea was that they would bring their education back to Egypt or Jordan or wherever. But there's a way that if they work in a medically underserved area like Appalachia or even southern Missouri,
Cape Girardeau,
that if they work there for 5 years, then they get to stay and they can adjust their status and get a green card. So again, there's all these parts of the economy We could talk about farm workers. We could talk about hotel workers. We could talk about lots of different occupations in which the United States and the United States citizens are benefiting from a rigged system.
So that I kind of assumed and knew that to be true, not anecdotally, but just kind of reading the tea leaves a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Squawk Box nerd in the morning, so I watch all that. But I find it really, really funny, and for the MAGA crowd in particular, even individuals that are just like, look, he was never my guy, but I was never going to vote for Harris, right? That kind of individual. You know, when you talk about immigration, you talk about the classes of people, the types of individuals via the type of visa, H-1B versus a J-1, et cetera. You're talking about the smartest tech people. You're talking about doctors. And then as we go down the ladder, we're talking about, for example, within the trades, you find a roofing crew, right? Find a drywall crew. Right. They are going to be largely Hispanic, and they are going to motor, and they are going to make the general contractor a lot of money. There are big chunks of those individuals that are quote illegal. And then farm hands, et cetera. In every segment of our economy, if you just break it into simple tiers, what it appears to me is we're suppressing wages, and we're basically making excuses for domestic individuals and families that are not stepping up in those areas. Am I wrong? Am I misviewing this from an arm wrestling standpoint between the domestic arguments and the value of these immigrant workers?
No, I don't think you are. I think you've pretty much nailed it. I think that this is something that we've been seeing more and more, and this is why I think the discussions around immigration are just so simplistic and so red or blue and so antagonistic that there's a little bit of nuance here. There should be a little bit of nuance here, and we need people. I mean, to me, JB, it all comes down, as everything does, to gerrymandering and money in politics, right? So we're allowing the politicians to define their districts, and they're defining their districts as red and blue as possible, so therefore they don't have to listen to each other. They don't have to listen to each other, and they don't have to listen to people that are their constituents that aren't of their party, right?
Yep.
So you're never going to have compromise. You're always going to have, like you said, the two edges of the Newton's cradle, and that's who's running the show. And it's especially true in immigration because we haven't had immigration reform since the 90s, because Congress has refused to act. I was thinking about this. It's almost like the environment. We're starting to see more and more extreme swings when a new president comes in, right? So Obama had control of the House and Senate in the first 2 years of his presidency, and he tried to get the DREAM Act passed, and he came really close. That would have been the first major piece of legislation dealing with undocumented people in a really long time. And he came really close, but Steve King, that racist from Iowa, was able to keep it from getting it to the floor. So what did Obama do? He created DACA, and so he tried to do administratively what he couldn't do legislatively, right? And so for those looking at politics, then it swings a little bit to the left. We have a Democratic president. Then Trump comes in and swings it a little bit. You know, he really didn't attack DACA until the last 2 years of his presidency. It took him about 2 years to really, before the crazies started taking over control of his executive branch. And so...
Yeah, because all the qualified ones were already let go, fired, or walked.
Yeah, it took a while for them to really... And that was, one of the things now they're really trying to infuse their people a whole lot faster. So it swung a little bit to the right under Trump, and then Biden comes in. He didn't really care about immigration, but it swings naturally back to the left a little bit. And now with Trump back, now we have, them trying to do administratively, again, what they can't do legislatively, and they're trying to swing it far to the right. So it's all based on the interpretations of the same statutes. The laws haven't changed. It's just who's in the White House. And so it's more drastic because we're electing the people that are from the far fringes.
So let's not give Senior Joe a pass here.
No.
Let's talk a little bit about the last administration. Again, this goes back to I have a lot of quiet haters that think that I'm just absolutely TDS all the time, et cetera. And they conveniently forget that I was absolutely not a Biden fan. He was simply not Trump in 2020 for me. But when it comes to the border, I just want to get, I'm just going to throw it out there super generically. The Biden administration's policy or lack thereof, or action/inaction when it came to physical crossings at the border. As an immigration attorney living here in the middle of blood red Missouri, how did you view how they handled it and or didn't?
Well, again, I am angry at Joe Biden from an immigration standpoint, not because of the way probably most of your listeners are. They think he's not conservative enough. He's not close enough to Trump. So to me, they're both way too conservative. And I think that when we talk about the border, we have to remember certain things. And everyone likes to talk about following the law. Why don't they just do things the right way? Let's follow the law. Well, there are laws, and one of those laws says that if you are a human being and you reach a port of entry, you have the right to apply for asylum in the United States at that port of entry.
What about those that are trying to define /split hairs or be social media
experts,
PhDs on exactly what asylum stands for? Can you take a second and just maybe simplistically define, if I walk to the border, whether I'm Mexican, Guatemalan, El Salvadorian, et cetera, and I say I want to claim asylum, and I'm just poor, sad, scared, and I want a new job. Mm-hmm. Connect the dots for me.
Sure. So in order to make a claim of asylum, you have to show that you have a well-founded fear of persecution based on one of 5 things: your race, your religion, your political opinion, religion. Did I say religion?
Yeah, race, religion, political.
Nationality. So those are the 4. And then there's one called particular social group. And that's sort of a catch-all where you can define a group of people, say gay people in Saudi Arabia, or domestic women in Guatemala who are being beaten by their spouses whose government won't protect them. If you can show that you have a well-founded fear of going back to your country because of one of those 5 categories.
Does poverty count?
No, poverty doesn't count. You wouldn't get asylum based on a poverty. You'd have to show that there are state actors who are either actively oppressing you because of one of those 5 categories, or are refusing to protect you. Either they're the ones doing it or they're refusing to protect you.
Well, isn't that then the cyclical argument to where if you're coming from one of those nations and poverty is ultimately the reason why you're going, you could point to your government as being ineffective and not providing security, safety, jobs, etc.?
That would be a losing argument. It can't be things are bad in my country. It has to be something specific about you.
Got it.
Something specific about you that you can't change or shouldn't have to change. And so the law says, based on international treaties, based on the U.S. code, that if somebody has that credible fear, and it's not just we let everybody in, it's that they see an asylum officer and they make their claim. They explain why it is that they fear going back. And
so, for example, in Mexico, with the prevalence of the cartel in most communities, when they find out that families have members that are living in San Diego or Chicago or wherever they live, that could be Columbia, Missouri, when they go to them for kickbacks because they know the money is coming from the States, does that qualify if they go?
Well, that's a little irony that I was thinking about the other day. First couple days of the Trump administration, they said that they were going to declare these narco cartels as terrorist organizations. And they probably will do that. But if they do that, it's going to make everybody's asylum cases from the Latin American countries that you just mentioned a whole lot stronger, because now you have the U.S. government recognizing that the people that are oppressing these people in these countries are
terrorist organizations.
Right.
Isn't the gerbil wheel of hypocrisy just getting larger? Because that's what it feels like. Like, we're really not solving problems. And I'm going to go back to the whole Biden issue because I do not want to give him a pass, but I do want to separate the difference between policy, lack thereof, when it comes to paperwork or legal status or claim, et cetera. I want to get out of the weeds of the paperwork and the X's and O's. And I just want to get to the optics and the physical manifestation of humans crossing the border and what appeared to be a lack of action. Yeah. How did it make you feel? Because we all saw the pictures. It's kind of like this is where I'm going to play devil's advocate, because when I watch January 6th film footage And I hear friends that have voted conservative, Republican, and even MAGA that are like, oh, J6, what about all those FBI agents that were embedded in blah, blah, blah. It's all like my eyes, my ears don't fail me. I watched what happened in real time. Every news outlet in the world watched it in real time. We all saw what we saw. The narrative is being shifted to these conspiracies at this point. You know what? And a small percentage of them are probably true. But in the macro, that was a fucked up day, and those people deserve to still be in prison. Same goes for what was happening at the border.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you look at these towns, you look at the border towns, you look at the rivers, you look at the trash. I mean, those aren't made. They're not made up. And I get some of them were fake videos, fake pictures, etc. But in totality, it was chaos. Speak to that as someone that is, you know, again, take the X's and O's and the weeds of the paperwork and the legality out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The optics. Address the optics.
Well, in my humble opinion, they pick and choose when they show the optics. In other words, the media loves to highlight the bad things that immigrants do, the bad things they do at the border, the bad problems under any administration. And, you know, as soon as Biden took office, they were starting to talk about the caravans. Like Fox is almost calling for these people to come. So I really think that you got to take a lot of it with a grain of salt, that they were literally putting almost every asylum officer in the country down at the border to figure out if these people had credible fears or not. So I believe the Biden administration, as much as I dislike them and think they did a poor job, that when it comes to the border, they were actually trying to follow the law, as opposed to Trump, who's refusing to let the people get to the border to make the asylum claim. And so I don't know. I think that it's in answer to your question, I think that a lot of people are willfully ignorant. They're purposely ignorant, that if they just have a talking point that somebody tells them to believe, that they can just think is true, then they don't have to do any. They are outsourcing their thinking, and as long as they have a credible basis or something that makes them feel better about why they believe what they believe, then who gives a crap about these people? But
did your skin crawl whenever you would hear the administration, whether it's Joe or Kamala, et cetera, when they would say, you know, for example, Kamala in her now infamous The View morning, you know, what would you do differently? I wouldn't do anything differently.
Yeah.
You know, oh, well, can you explain why, you know, 10,000 people today crossed? Well, that's not really a problem. You know, it seemed as if it was complete. There was no, they didn't even attempt to justify.
Yeah.
It was completely a, you know,
don't look
denial.
over here. Yeah. Well, I believe we should have a secure border. I don't have a problem with us having a secure border. I think we should have a secure border. I think we should have a humane way of processing people that arrive at the border, and that we should honor our obligations under treaties and the law. So if you say you want to have a safe and sane situation, I'm all for that. But I'm also for making it easier for people to come to the United States and work and go back home. We don't have good systems for allowing people into the United States, because a lot of these people don't want to live here. They just want to be able to come and make a little bit of money and support their family back home. I'm in support of that. I think that's good. I think that benefits. I always say I'd rather have things come out of the shadows and have it all be up front, instead of this black market stuff that we're seeing where people are really getting exploited.
Well, it's funny, you know, because, you know, we mentioned at the beginning, we both have kids that are roughly the same age in college and high school, and you know, and entering into, quote, their adult years here in just a couple of years. And I always think about this in terms of, you know, the role that immigrants and immigrant labor plays in, you know, somebody that's coming over here that just wants to send money home, you know, and we've all read the articles, or at least those that want to open their eyes and read the article have seen that, you know, the value of the tax revenue that's derived from illegal immigrants that are paying into federal taxes, Social Security in particular, it's $98 billion annually, plus or minus, right? So almost $100 billion a year that goes into the system. And with what little they're making, to your point, and this is why I brought it up, they're not buying a, you know, ranch house out in O'Fallon, Missouri. They can't. They physically can't. They are living in a home with probably 2, 3, 4 other groups, and they're just trying to stockpile a little bit and go back. Our system, though, it's so broke. What we're really avoiding and ignoring is our kids. They too cannot buy that house in the burbs, you know? So it's like this, we're so mad at the reality of what's happening in our own homes and what our kids are not able to achieve, because this is the first generation ever in which the 30-year-olds are living at a lesser level than their parents are.
Well, in a long time, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not that's not reversing anytime soon. So part of my theory is it's so easy to blame immigrants.
The brown people over there.
Yeah.
As opposed to the corporate overlords. I don't like to use that phrase, but that's what I mean. The people that are actually benefiting from the system.
Yeah, so let me ask this. The border bill. Everybody would say bipartisan border. Look, if you have 2 out of 265 Republicans, you can claim it's bipartisan, but it's really not bipartisan.
Yeah.
But let's be clear, nobody can deny the reality that Trump and Vance said, do not sign that.
Right.
I want to take a second and talk about what a bipartisan legislation, that bill in particular, what does it mean to you whenever you see it get close to the finish line to at least make some steps forward, fail, and here we are now living under executive orders again? Mm-hmm. How important is it for Congress to do its job, and what do you view as a success if they were to do that?
So we have to remember, and I thought we might cover this a little bit earlier, but there are 13 to 15 million people in the United States without status, right? And so about 2/3 of them entered without inspection, which means it's really, really hard for them to get any kind of immigration relief, even if they marry a U.S. citizen. And then the other third are people who came on visas and overstayed. So historically, I've always said, well, what do you want to do with those people? Do you really want to try and deport them? And so now we're about to see them try that, right? And my hope is that what we're going through right now, what we're starting to go through, and which is going to get a whole lot worse, might be the impetus for there to be actual meaningful change to our immigration laws. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. But am I hopeful? Yeah, I am hopeful. So what comprehensive immigration reform would look like for me is figure out how you want to punish these people that are here. You want them to wait 10 years. You want them to, right now, JB, there's no line to get into. There's no fine to pay. There's no form to fill out. There's literally nothing for these people to do. Everyone says, so then the question is, do you want them to leave or not?
Let me ask a quick sidebar question. From a legal perspective, technically speaking, is an undocumented illegal immigrant that's here, is the legal charge of their misdemeanor, is it a greater or less than charge than if you get a DUI as a domestic citizen?
It's hard to say because it's a federal misdemeanor versus a state DUI. So I would say roughly the same.
Yeah, because you know the deal. Like on socials, you start to see these debates. And it's like,
very few people are prosecuted criminally for entering the United States.
Pre-Trump, if somebody's undocumented illegal immigrant and they get pulled over or caught or cited, what would you typically be seeing as the punishment?
You mean for an undocumented person that gets pulled over by a state or local police officer?
Yes, correct.
Nothing. Yeah.
So anecdotally, I have a friend that we text often. Mm-hmm. He's on the other side of the fence from me.
Sure.
And the other day he read one of my posts where I was like, "Hey, good job, El Maguey." Everybody saw the news locally where they went in there and took.
Well, not only did they go in there, they brought the FBI with them. The FBI spokeswoman in St. Louis was forced to talk about the fact that the FBI is raiding El Maguey. I mean, can you think of a worse waste of our resources for law enforcement than to be going to El Maguey and O'Fallon to see if they can find some undocumented people just to meet some quota for Thomas Homan?
Yeah, and they took 4 people out.
Yeah.
And then you and I both know what happened. All 4 were, in fact, not illegal.
Right.
And are right back at work, and yet that business is going to be, was just absolutely pounded by its own local community of MAGA voters.
And who've been eating at El Maguey with a smile on their face for the last 10 years.
Yeah, they love the burrito tacos as long as it's not by one of them people. Like, so disgusting. Anyway, so I put a post out and like, what are we really doing here? Are you solving problems by killing your taco supply in suburban St. Charles County? Like, that's not working. What are you going to do about your roofs, et cetera? Well, he had a friend that's in the roofing business, and the other day they had a call, and I'm not going to name any of the names,
Sure.
but basically there was a crew that was popped, and one of the individuals was taken away, or I think it was just one. But all of the others, including the ones that are in fact illegal immigrants, undocumented, but did not have a warrant or some felony track record, they were all returned to the job site. And his point was like, well, see, this isn't just blanket, we're going to round everybody up that's illegal. I'm like, yeah, but that's not what the narrative is. That's not what we've been told.
And I seem to remember the Republicans decrying what they called catch and release, but isn't that catch and release?
Yeah.
I just posted today on LinkedIn. So because of the quotas that Thomas Homan has put in, and because they're indiscriminately getting as many immigrants as they can, they are now over capacity. They're at 109% of their beds. So they are actually now releasing a lot of these people that they are arresting and making sure the news knows about that. So here we are doing catch and release again because they don't have the capacity to hold all these people. They only have 39,000 beds.
Yeah, catch and release, stop and frisk.
Yeah.
All that fun stuff. I tell you what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the local politics in regards to immigration, specifically what's going on in the Moleg House and some of the shit they're trying to pass. I want to get your take on that, and we'll cover a few other things here. So quick break. Be right back. Okay, we're back. Quick stretch. As I mentioned before the quick break, I wanted to bring us back into the world of the Show Me State, and boy, do we show the rest of the world how maybe not to legislate. I want to talk to you a little bit about. He might be your state senator?
He is,
Mr. David Gregory. Friends with some of my friends, to be honest with you, because he came from Sunset Hills. Lives out in Chesterfield now. I'll just surmise it. He wrote a bill. He wanted to basically provide $1,000 bounty fee for citizens that help tip and turn in illegal immigrants. And then I believe there was like a second part of it in which they wanted to change the punishment to, if you're caught, life in prison. There's pieces of this. I'm sure I'm not connecting the dots perfectly. But fundamentally speaking, it wasn't enough to just allow the federal government to kind of create guidelines and maybe work with state entities, et cetera, to catch real bad guys. But now we want to empower our populace to take it upon themselves to determine which brown person is illegal. And if you're right, we'll give you $1,000 in bonus bucks. Talk about Senator Gregory's approach and kind of what you thought when you saw that thing hitting the news wire and actually hitting the floor of the Senate.
I wanted to go testify against it last Monday, but I found out that the hearing was the next day and I wasn't able to go down. So Missouri is last in education, last in infrastructure. Missouri's failing in so many ways. So instead of dealing with legitimate issues, we have clowns like David Gregory introducing bills that sound like something out of The Running Man with Stephen King. Like, let's just have everybody running around with guns and cameras chasing down immigrants so that they can make some side cash. We need to remember that there's this, people want to talk about following the law. There's a provision in the Constitution called the Supremacy Clause, and that is if Congress legislates, then the states are supposed to back off. Immigration is a federal issue. In my opinion, states should not be having much legislation at all when it comes to immigration. But then to put on top of that, we have this inhumane, almost sideshow idea that even the Republicans, even the head of the Missouri House says this thing's not going anywhere. So they're all trying to out-Trump Trump. They're all trying to get in his good graces. They're all trying to be the next MAGA plus. And to me, it's absolutely inhumane and disgusting.
So I believe, well, at the time that I release this, I'm fairly certain that this thing has hit the roadblock in the House or in the Senate. But to my understanding, also there's continued effort to just constantly change the language of some of these attempts. What would have to happen to basically get these people to stop trying to out MAGA, and or does the federal government really want that? Because the Republican Party, in my opinion, they probably want state houses to be diving into stupid shit like this because it creates a little bit of the smoke and mirrors, or a lot of the smoke and mirrors. What do you think is really going to... Is anybody ever going to slap their hands, or are we going to need to see a midterm and another election to basically say, hold on, fuckers, you can't do this shit?
Well, I have a Republican buddy, and I don't spend much time like you. God bless you for talking to people that are MAGA light or MAGA. And I was talking to a buddy who's Republican, and he said he thinks they're overplaying their hand. I don't think Americans want all this chaos. I think that they purposely lied to themselves and say Trump's not that bad, and so they voted for him again. His numbers went up, which was incredible. And so, to me, I don't honestly believe anyone who says that when I voted for him last time, I didn't really know what I was getting. I don't think that's true. But let's say that it is true. Nobody can say that this time. Everybody who voted for Trump and for Project 2025 knew what they were getting. And as far as whether I think someone's going to slap their hands, I gave up hope of people standing up to Trump after January 6th, after his impeachment, that and the Supreme Court is, to me, the fealty shown by the Supreme Court to Donald Trump. And
I'll go back further. I can't believe grab him by the pussy didn't end it all.
Right. Or the mocking the disabled guy. I mean, all of it. It's all about inhumane. The cruelty is the selling point, not a detraction. It's where they're at.
Well, what I love is like everybody's like, oh, I can take the mean tweets, and no, he's just talking locker room talk. I'm voting for him because he's a businessman. I'm like, okay, which of his 6 bankruptcies is your favorite? And somebody the other day was like, oh, our government, we're 36 trillion in debt. We need somebody to fix it. And I'm like, well, you can't file Chapter 11 on a global scale.
But if Steve Bannon is right that they just need to put out 3 crazy things a day.
Yeah.
Have they ever had a better politician to do that than Donald Trump? I mean,
none.
Right, none. So it's a match made in hell between the two of them, because Trump gives them the sideshow Barker stuff, but what you have to pay attention to are the people behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
The ones that are doing the work of Project 2025. And I another article that gave me some hope was, it was a professor talking about Trump, and he said, I'll be worried if Trump goes slowly. If Trump goes quickly, then I'll know that he knows that he's not going to be able to legislate most of this stuff, and that the executive orders is just to get everybody all ginned up. And so the fact that they are working outside the system, I mean, right now, my biggest concern after the election was they have the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. And so if they want to...
And social media.
Right. If they want to change our immigration laws, the only thing that might save it is the filibuster, which of course could also be taken away. So my concern was that they were going to try to really change the INA, change the Immigration Nationality Act. So far, it's just been a bunch of sideshow stuff, but that's what I'm paying attention to. I'm wanting to see what are they going to try to do legislatively to really change. Like right now, you can sponsor your brother or sister to come to the United States. I think they want to get rid of that. There's this thing called the diversity visa that allows people from underrepresented countries to apply for this lottery. 10 million people apply for 50,000 slots, and we've built up people from around the world in the United States through that program. That one, you think even Democrats would vote to get rid of that?
Let me ask you specifically a geographical question, given our role, influence, and chaos that we created post 9/11 in the Middle East, in Iraq, Afghanistan in particular, and now, quote, working with Israel and what is occurring in Gaza with the Palestinians, etc. Through your business. Mm-hmm. What has your experience been with Middle Eastern immigrants from these war-torn areas, and what is truing up in real time, given what we have done and or supported?
Well, a couple things. One, Jason Kander's a hero. Follow him, and he was on 60 Minutes. He was able to get his people out of Afghanistan, but there are a ton of people that we left behind there in Afghanistan and Iraq who helped U.S. soldiers. So Jason Kander's story is the exception. We've really abandoned those people. as an immigration lawyer dealing with my client base is predominantly from the Middle East, and they're Muslim and Arabs. That's probably 80% of our practice. And it's the typical immigrant story. Come to the United States, work your ass off, raise your kids, try to make life better for them, experience some discrimination and hatred and vilification by politicians, but they're pushing through. They're adapting. Their kids are adapting. But to your point, their kids are going to be suffering those same problems that our kids are suffering, which is that the mobility and the development for younger people isn't there like it was when you and I were younger.
Let me play devil's advocate for a little bit and talk about immigration and immigrants in particular as they come into communities, because one of the issues that a lot of people have is they just don't understand it, right? And what I liken it to or address it as is assimilation. When you think in terms of language, when you think in terms of religion and all these things that are kind of like integrated into a community, right? Take whatever the city was in Ohio with cats and dogs.
Springfield.
Yeah, thank you. With Haitians. Most Haitians don't speak English when they come here. They speak French or,
Creole.
Creole. I can understand how blood pressure, anxiety, all these kind of human natural reactions occur for certain individuals. Like if they go into a ethnic community, be it, Chinatown in South Side of Chicago, or if you go down Cherokee in some of the restaurants, right? And you walk in and you don't know what they're saying. Right? That is kind of just a natural response. So when it is Muslim in particular, where people come over and most generations now, our kids in particular, and even the ones that are maybe, 10 years older than them, a couple of years younger than us, they are products of the kind of terrorists on TV, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. How do you personally engage or address those just assimilation concerns, and they're not like us.
So St. Louis has obviously benefited a ton from the work of the International Institute, and that basically anywhere that there's been a war since the 70s, there's lots of those people here in the United States because of refugee resettlement work by agencies like International Institute. And of course, the biggest example of that is the Bosnians and the communities that
Bevo.
Right. So I was in Minneapolis this weekend seeing our son Ibrahim and going to the David Gray concert. And
twofer.
And we took him out to dinner. We went to the grocery store, and I was struck by how many Somali refugee families are there in Minneapolis. Here in St. Louis, the Bosnians are white, so they look like a lot of the people. In Minnesota, where it's a pretty white place, there were a lot of Somalis. So we saw a young lady. Amani was a little sad. There was a young lady. She was about 12 with her mother, and they were buying groceries, and there was some little dispute with the cashier about a coupon or something. And this 12-year-old was having to
translate
and be the voice. And Amani totally resonated with that because she was the youngest of the three in her family. So she had to figure out how America worked fastest, and she watched Sesame Street, and so she learned English faster than everybody else. And so we could see this 12-year-old girl interacting with this Latina shop lady, trying to figure that out. So we were thinking about that. And then I went to Lifetime Fitness in the morning, and I spent the day there working in the morning. And the number of Somali men coming in who were wearing nice clothes, who were living the life that lots of people dream of. I mean, for them, I would imagine that they are in shock of where they are, that they're in Minnesota of all places. Somalia is hotter than hell. Mm-hmm. And then to be in the middle of Minnesota. But I would say that most Minnesotans are happy with the contributions that the Somali community has made, just as we are here with the Bosnians.
Well, but let me ask a specific question though. The misunderstanding, the fear of the language, or the kind of, like, I had an individual tell me one time, look, I'm so tired of going to U.S. Bank and trying to decipher which language I get to pick on the screen, and it's a shallow argument for sure, but I think back to the process of, or the role of Congress in legislation that we don't have, because legislation is all about give and take, right? Quid pro quo. So when you think of these things that are like really simple that scare people, do you think that there's room for, okay, if we're going to do this, driver's licenses or, the English language, like we have to create some form of benchmark. What is the Mendoza line that a Midwestern American that's afraid of brown people will be okay with if we make changes to the immigration system? Do you think there's things that could be done that isn't just these people should be allowed 100% of all their freedoms and lifestyles, et cetera?
I want white Americans to feel supported and safe, and I feel really bad for them when they feel threatened by having to change their language on an ATM card. But here's what I'll say.
I know it sounds ridiculous. As I was saying, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds crazy. But I mean, these are the real conversations that I'm hearing.
Right. Well, here's what I'll say. Get ready, because America is getting less white. That one of the things crazy J.D. Vance is all consumed about is having kids, right? And that white Americans aren't having enough kids. And there's this whole racist great replacement theory that people are really sort of tuned into, like, oh my God, America is turning more brown. And I believe that Donald Trump and a lot of the MAGA stuff that started with the Tea Party is really a reaction to the fact that we elected a black man named Barack Obama
all day
to president of the United States. And I think that it's had so many reverberations. And if you look at the contrast between the kind of person that Barack Obama was and the kind of president that he was, and Donald Trump's ways of being, it's night and day. But there is a huge segment of America that has remembered that they are the majority, and their goal is to beat down the minority every chance they get.
Yeah, the irony of that whole situation is also, everybody conveniently forgets that Barack Obama entered in, record win, and the primary reason was, number one, we'd been in war forever under Bush. Bush destroyed the economy in 2008, allowed, just a complete financial collapse across the board. Just issue after issue after issue, in comes Obama, and markets take off, interest rates fall down to zero, right? Everybody's buying 30-year notes at 3.5, 2 points, whatever it is.
Right.
Markets are breaking records, and nobody wants to talk about the fact that he was, quote, the deporter in chief. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that the people that broke our banking system, it was Obama that allowed them to not go to jail,
right?
Put them all right back in their CEO positions. It's like the hypocrisy goes both ways, and when and to your point, why do so many people view that as the tipping point? It's because he was black.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with his policies, because he made everybody richer, and healthcare, right? Guess what? There's 25 million more people that have healthcare because of the ACA. Mm-hmm. But they want to get rid of Obamacare, but they want to keep their Affordable Health Care Act.
Right. There's that disconnect again.
Yeah. Hilarious. Right. So let me ask you a couple closing, parting questions here, because you got real work to do, I'm assuming. I'm going to go back to my note sheet. I jotted down what makes you keep doing it, and I have kind of three possibilities. Is it the fight? Is it the wins? Or is it just out of principle? Or is it all three? Or is it four? Then I missed number 4.
You're good. I don't like bullies. And I view the government and the way that they treat immigrants. I believe that this is all a test run and a mirror on our society, that the way we treat immigrants. I think if they get away with beating down the rights of immigrants, that then they're going to start turning on their enemies, and that we're just going to see more and more of an expansion of really hard-nosed tactics and oppression of people. So to me, I like it on a global scale, and I like it on an individual scale. There's no substitute to walking somebody out of deportation, or there's no substitute to getting somebody their citizenship on a per person basis. I mean, we are changing people's lives every day. If I get somebody's spouse here faster and they start their life here together, they might have a different kid than they would have if I hadn't done my job, right? Like, it's mind-boggling when you think about how we've had people that we've met when they were a student, and we see them all the way to citizenship, right? And so on a micro level, it's huge. It's a huge impact, much more so than barge damage. And then on the macro level, I love my YouTube channel and I love talking to immigrants. I love making them feel better about the process. And most of all, I love them feeling that they have somebody who understands them and cares about them and wants to protect them from all of the forces that we've been talking about for this last hour and a half. I get great solace and glee in just sort of sticking it in the eye of those people who would oppress.
So you just mentioned it, and I want to maybe close with this. Your YouTube channel, the other day you had a post, and it was kind of like one of those milestones. And I love it because I literally use the same analogies when I talk to clients that are interested in podcasting or creating content, because inevitably everybody's like, well, I don't want to do it. Who's going to hear it? Who's going to see it? It's only going to be 2 people. Well, if you had a chance to sit down with 2 people and just really focus the conversation, you'd probably take that. Then it's a conference room, and then, oh my God, now it's a small venue. But in your world, you just crossed that 100K mark on your YouTube channel. So first off, what is the YouTube channel titled, so people can go check it out, and I'll have it in the show notes. But number 2, talk about that grind. Talk about creating content and what that means to you.
That's been great. So I started the channel in 2013. I paid somebody $10,000 to make me 8 videos.
Wow.
They are literally the worst performing videos on my channel. And so I started with a high 8 Kodak, a little flip cam. And I had a little bitty office that was about a third of the size of this space.
Yeah.
And my desk was over there, and the camera and green screen was over here. So the first 3 or 4 years, what I would do is if an immigrant asked me a question, I would write down the question. And then if I knew the answer, I'd make a video right away. If I didn't know the answer, I'd go look it up, and then I'd make a video, because I figured if someone had that question, then somebody else would. And then I started getting good feedback. So like, to your point, I went to bed and somebody viewed my video, and then somebody liked my video, and then there was a comment, and then after a while,
subscriber.
Right. After a while, there's a subscriber, and then somebody said, Jim, I watched your video and I want to hire you to be my lawyer. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So it's literally been, I've made 2,000 videos, and I've done 757 live hours where people just call and ask me immigration questions. And so, I posted, and you laughed. You said, this is what I tell my clients. I'm an overnight success, but it took me 12 years. So I'm persistent, and I love making the content. And the live show now, for me, like, I much rather come do a show with you like this, or have people ask me questions, because I'm sort of out of questions to ask myself after 2,000 videos,
Yeah, it is funny. You kind of like, you catch yourself regurgitating concepts and theories and, really anecdotes, right?
But it's all new to the people that just found you.
It absolutely is, and the funny thing is, people, once they bite onto something, what do they inevitably do? They go back to episode 1.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, I liked episode 740.
Right. Yeah. So, we're a binge society. So when people are hot and bothered and thinking about hiring an attorney, and then they can watch 10 of your videos. And here's the thing about video, and this is what I like about video, is you can't lie on video. After a while, your personality comes through, your knowledge comes through. Doing a live show with no books and just talking about what you know, everybody knows you know your stuff.
And monkey statues, right?
Monkey statues, for sure.
You like that, a little Darwinism?
I do.
Well, Jim, hacking, thank you very much for your time, man.
My pleasure.
You're fighting the good fight, and I think that, peeling the onion back a little bit on what the reality of the situation is. At the end of the day, it's so much easier to consume things via a meme or a GIF.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go to this length, but the reality is our world is really at a length much longer and farther than this.
Yeah.
So keep doing the good fight. Tell Amani I said hello.
I shall.
And I'm going to roll us out here with a little David Gray in honor of your formative years.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome back anytime, man.
Thanks, bud.
I appreciate it. And if you're listening, like, review, follow, share, all free. I have low self-esteem. I'd appreciate it. And we're out of here. Catch you next time.